Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Thank you for jumping back in with me for another episode of the podcast, and it is quite a bit that's going on currently in this world, in this nation, and I'm sure in your communities, and I think that it's good that we have conversations and dialogue amongst each other that is fortifying, that is edifying, and that causes us to think and sparks thought and helps and enhances our consciousness. And that's what I strive to provide on the Nora Speaks podcast, because we need more than just entertainment. We need more than something to dumb us down or keep us down. We need something more than that's, going to make us laugh and giggle. And while, entertainment has its place, we also have to make sure we keep a space for information. And so if you're listening to this podcast, you have made a space for information. And for that, and to you, I am grateful. If this is your first time listening to the Nora Speaks podcast, Nora Speaks is a podcast that is for the Black community. And one of the main goals and objectives is to enhance the consciousness of the listener, to spark thought, as I just said, and to outline means and strategies so that we can improve the outcomes in our community. And this podcast is specifically about the Black community. I was going to say unapologetically, but that language or that word has been used in a way that I'm going to discuss in a future podcast. But when someone says that you're unapologetically something, meaning they're not apologizing for it, I think that has taken on a connotation that we have to discuss and explore. So that's why I hesitated there to say unapologetically. But I will say that this podcast is uncompromisingly for the Black community, because I believe the Black community needs a specific message and a messenger from its own community. And I do not, I don't hesitate. I don't regret, and I will not change the idea about the Black community needing a messenger for this community and a message for this community. And some have asked or suggested that I open up my podcast and I broaden it out and I include other folks who are not of the Black community. And I will not do that because I think that I have, and this podcast has and serves a purpose, a very specific purpose. I'm not a healthcare provider working in a hospital and saying that I'm not going to serve a patient because the patient doesn't come from the Black community. I'm not a educational institution. It's a public educational institution denying others because they're not from a certain demographic. I'm not a social service agency saying that, I'm denying your entry or serving you because you don't come from a certain demographic. What I am doing is sharing a message specifically for a certain community. And I just mentioned that because when that suggestion was posed to me, it was posed to me actually by a Caucasian male who heard me speak about my podcast, and he suggested that I could be more effective if I opened it up And I really thought, I thought, kind of how presumptuous of you to think that I should listen to your guidance on opening up my show so that I can treat my people. And I thought that conversation, or what he shared, was so symbolic of what occurs in music, where we have gatekeepers that decide what music is being made streamed. There's gatekeepers in book publishing. There's gatekeepers in politics who decide who goes, who stays, who comes. And I understand that it was just natural for him to provide that guidance and instruction, because, I'm sure he's used to people listening and doing what he asks. But that's not the case here. Nora Speaks is a podcast that I value, and I value the purpose, which is to assist my community in doing better and being better. And so I'm very protective of it. And just because somebody does fit this demographic doesn't mean that they're going to be a guest on this show, or because I'm even selective with that. Because if someone wants to be a guest, or wants to highlight themselves or their product or their work, then for me to bring that person to you, they would have to be somebody that is effective, that is successful, that is consistent, and that is doing what they're talking about. In our community, we have a lot of people who are talking. We have a lot of people who are on social media building brands, but they're not actually on the ground in our communities and showing that the idea that they have in their mind is something they're implementing with their hands, and it's effective, right? We have a lot of people who may be visionaries, right, but their methods don't work. And I am looking for success, and I want to be successful, and I want my community to be successful. So I have to bring those who represent that. And so, yeah, Nora Speaks is a podcast for the Black community, and it will remain that, regardless of who thinks what, or who says what. We have to be firm, we have to be resolute, and we have to be unafraid. And I am not afraid to say here on this podcast that this is a show for the Black community. And I've been in conversations where Black people are talking about issues that are impacting us. And when a Caucasian person comes around, they start whispering, or they get quiet. Or when they wanted to refer to a Black person, they kind of point to the back of their hand. And I think, you can say the word Black. It's not a bad word. It's not a vulgar term. And there should be no hesitation for Black people to talk about issues that are affecting Black people and our communities. And I understand that we live in the United States of America, and a lot of us, believe in the melting pot. However, I don't think that we can serve ourselves or anyone else if we're dissolved, if we don't retain those unique, distinct characteristics, cultural traits, ethnic traits that are ours. And so I reject that idea that we should all kind of melt in together. That hasn't worked for us. That mindset has not worked for us. That mentality has not worked for us. And as much as we try to melt ourselves in and try to find singularity with others, we are not successful, as evidenced by what we are watching on the news and what we're reading in the newspapers, if we're still reading newspapers. But it's evidenced in the outcomes. And so for me, I say that we need to be accountable to ourselves, and we can't wait and look and expect other people to start tackling our issues before we get up, stand up, and do something for self. And that's just a Muslim in me. I'm a member of the Nation of Islam. You know that if you've listened before. And, we're very, very focused on being accountable and being, accountability just brings dignity. Being responsible for yourself, being responsible for your family, being responsible for your community, that just brings dignity, and it forces others to respect us. So, yeah, Nora Speaks is a podcast for the Black community. And I know there are podcasts for the Hispanic community, for the Mexican American community, for the Puerto Rican community. And that's great. I think that's wonderful. When I hear Caucasian people or other people talk about how they have pride in being white or being Irish or being Italian, I think that's great. I think it would be unnatural for a white person not to have white pride. And I think when we nitpick and try to police other people's affection to their own, we look and sound silly. The issue for us is that we don't have the right amount of affection for our own. So I've said a lot just in that opening. I haven't gotten to my subject. In this podcast episode, I want to talk about the village. And I came across, I think it was a TikTok video 4 or 5 months ago. And there was a Black woman on, and she was sitting in her car, and she was dealing with some real challenges with her family and in her household, and specifically her children. And I think in the video she said she had 5 children. This is a Black woman, of course. And she was struggling. I mean, the children just were unruly. They were engaging in property destruction within the home. It seemed like they were totally out of control. Sister was overwhelmed, and she was making a video. And in the video, she mentioned she was a single mother, and she also mentioned that she wants the village's help. And she questioned, where's the village? And, I had a lot of thoughts about that video. And then recently I came across another I think it was a social media post. I believe it was on Facebook, and it was a woman, and she had posted a picture of her son, and in the picture, the son was engaged in nefarious activities. He had weapons and drugs, and she was crying out for help, and she was like, "Come on, village, I need the village." And the village has its place, right? The saying, the proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. It does. It does take a village. My concern with these social media posts, and these are just social media posts, but I've been in conversations with people, with women, with mothers mostly, and they're, questioning, where's the village? Where's the village? And I think, well, the village is all around. The village is here. Where have you been? Now, the village is, it's a grouping of families and households. And the notion is that the village and families, household makes, group together makes community. And the village is supporting, and the village reinforces the values that the community upholds. When I have worked with young people who have been adjudicated in the criminal justice system or the juvenile justice system, and I've done intakes with their mothers and, to kind of get a background of what's going on with this young person, so often I find that these women are living in a sense of isolation. They're not engaged with the child's school, the child's teachers. Sometimes we see the parents, the mothers, warn their children ahead of time. If your teacher does A, B, or C, then you do this. And, when I was younger and, the idea was respect the teacher, respect the teacher. I know I didn't want my family to have to come up because I was unruly or disrespectful to the teacher. And now we know what it's like. Teachers got to deal with parents who come up wanting to fight them. Coaches have to deal with this. on the baseball field or the football field, the basketball court, the gymnasium. Parents are just really out of control when it comes to authority figures who oversee their children's activities. So parents are not necessarily plugged in. They're not supportive of teachers. They're not supportive of the coaches and the discipline and the rigor that the coach is putting that child through so that that child can become an efficient athlete in their sport. Some of these parents are not good neighbors. They don't respect those who are living around them. They're inconsiderate when it comes to parking, their guests, noise levels. They're not considerate. Often we see that they don't keep up their homes. There'll be trash or debris around their homes. These parents, when asked during my intakes, are you a part of any civic organization? Are you a part of any community organization? What church do you go to? What mosque do you go to? And they're not plugged in. They're not plugged in to any kind of volunteer activity. They're not a member of a church, a temple, social organizations, clubs. They don't participate with their child's athletic team. They fundraisers. They don't participate in that. They don't contribute snacks to the team. And so the question comes to, is there another parent involved? Is the child's father around? And, a lot of these women don't have any real familial structure. The child is not living with his or her father, or the children may have multiple fathers, and one child's father is in that child's life, but the other child's father, how that goes in our communities. And often during these intakes, the mother will say very derogatory things about the father right in front of the child, with the child sitting there while I'm just trying to get a little bit of social history. As parents, they're uninformed about who their city council member is. They don't have any kind of tether to the local political structure in their communities. They're not civically engaged. And so I say all of this because often we want to go to the village in times of crisis and expect the village to solve in a month what we took years and years and years of neglect to create. And this isn't, me trying to come down or bash mothers, bash single mothers, bash parents and families who have crisis with their young people. But I've seen trends, and I'm sharing this trend that I've seen in my community and that you may see in your community. And for us to demand of the village when we've not invested in the village is unfair. It's unfair to put an expectation on social service organizations, on a church pastor, on an imam to fix overnight what has been building up for years. It is so important that we are not disconnected. It is so important that we are anchored into our community. It is so important that we do not live in silos. We cannot be successful in isolation. And by our activities, by our involvement in our community, that means that we are engaged with other people. That means that we understand where the resources are. That means that my child knows that that teacher and I will be communicating, and I will find out if my child isn't behaving well. I will find out if my child is being unruly at practice. I will find out because I'm involved, because I'm there. And when I see that my child may begin trending in the wrong direction because I'm plugged in, then I already know where the services are. I already know where the mentors are. Or if because of unfortunate circumstances, my child may not have a father in his life or in her life, I am part of a church. I'm part of a temple, a mosque, a community activity where my child sees men who are strong men, who are teaching and sharing important and critical values. See, it's not that the village won't or shouldn't help in time of need, but if we're isolated, we really make the job hard on ourselves. When we are plugged in, right? When we are part of organizations, when we do volunteer, when we do engage civically, when we are at the practices and not just dropping our child off and leaving and coming back minutes, 15, 20, 30 minutes after practice has ended. When our children see that we are plugged in and engaged, while my head is down helping someone else, that means someone else is looking over my shoulder and taking a look at what my child is doing. You know, folks talk about back in my day, I did something wrong. I would get in trouble on the way home because Miss Kathy or Miss Ethel would see me and she would yell at me, or she would twist my ear, or she would scold me. And so I would get in trouble before I even got in trouble from my mom, right? People talked about how communities supported each other. They talked about how instrumental the village was, where you could go around a corner where your mom couldn't see or hear you, but somebody else saw and heard you, and they knew the values that your parents held for you, and they knew the expectations that your parents held for you. So we couldn't get away with it. But now our community is so broken up and we are so isolated and we're so separated that we're raising our children in these isolated pockets. And when we want help, when we need help, it's not fair to ridicule the village and say, well, where are you? How come the village isn't helping me? Our children know what we value by where we're spending our time, where we're spending our money. If our attention is on Instagram, they know we value Instagram. If our attention is on TikTok, they know we value TikTok. If I'm playing music that's talking about killing black people or sexually exploiting ourselves, then our children are seeing what we value. If we're outside volunteering and picking up trash, if we're keeping our house clean, if we are keeping our neighborhoods clean, if we're supporting the neighbor who had an unfortunate accident, then our children are seeing what we value. If our children see that we are valuing their other parent, we're valuing our spouse, that we respect the teacher, then our children are inclined to value what we value. So no, the village shouldn't neglect you in your time of need because you haven't been anchored in. But I just say, don't come after the village because you've maintained yourself and your family in isolation. I say, anchor in. Don't expect to make a withdrawal when you have not yourself made a deposit. Anchor in. Be the village. Don't just wait for the village to serve you. You too go out and serve the village. And there's so many different ways for you to get out and serve. And, our communities can be so much better if we didn't take on an individualistic, I'm doing me mentality. I'm taking care of mine mentality. Yeah, you can be taking care of yours, but yours is going to go out there and meet up with somebody that may be neglected, that may be hungry, that may not have heat in the wintertime or cool air in the summertime. Your child may meet up with somebody that doesn't have character and values. And when that person meets up with your child, bad things can happen. When that person meets up with you, bad things can happen. You may come outside and your car is not there. You may come home and your home is vandalized. So we have to think broader than just ourselves. I'm grateful for the village that has supported me and my family. And I'm grateful to be a supporter of the village. I'm grateful for the deposits. I'm grateful for the opportunity to make deposits in my village, and I will continue doing so. So we have to divest ourselves. We have to rid ourselves of the ideas that I'm doing me. We got to get rid of that idea. That's not natural to the Black community. That's not natural to us as Black people. I talked about us melting ourselves or dissolving ourselves away. That's not natural to us. We as Black people, our original nature and mindset is of group activity, group operations. That's why we say it takes a village to raise a child. And you could trace that proverb back to Africa, where there are villages. People live in villages, and they're very community oriented. And we've lost quite a bit of that, and we're suffering quite a bit because of that. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. It's always a privilege to have you listen in and to share, and I'm grateful always for your support. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@norahspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.